You
can.
mentioned you mentioned Jimmy Savile again, Charlie.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the royal family, because
Yeah.
talking to lots of Englanders and having visited London a few times, I actually just finished The Crown on Netflix a few weeks ago as
cool.
well. So I'm polishing up on my English history.
Yeah.
And as regards to child trafficking, it seems that the Tories and the Democrats here, so the righties on England and across the pond, the lefties here, seem to be the usual suspects for whatever reason. And it's just so weird watching The Crown and seeing, and this is after I learned a lot of these things about Lord Mountbatten and Ted Heath. Yeah, it's weird. Do you want to comment on that stuff?
Yeah. So in conjunction with, so when you think about the Epstein situation, and I'll tie this into the UK politics with Ted Heath. You see Epstein, we now know about who he was. Now, I've known about Epstein for years and years, but for the average person that has no interest in this stuff, they now know who Jeffrey Epstein is, and they know he was running sexual blackmail operations. So part of that is that you use this footage that you've got, or this information that you've got, to leverage somebody into doing something that you want, or to keep them quiet about something. And it's very effective because they can't go to the police about it. They just have to deal with it. So a lot of these people that are in high positions of politics, when we think of job interviews, we think of like someone posts a job, 5 candidates go and apply for that job, and they take their resumes and they do their interviews. Then the person doing the hiring will find the best candidate that's got went to the best school and seems the most engaged and the best fit for that, and then they'll pick them. But in politics, what happens is that they take those 5 candidates and they look for the worst one. And the reason why they look for the worst one is because they want the degenerate alcoholic, the scumbaggy guy. They want the guy that's cheating on his wife, or that's closeted homosexual, or a pedophile, or whatever, because they want to know your secrets. And usually those people are psychopaths or narcissists or money hungry or just predators or whatever. So they tend to flow to positions of power like government. So rather than weed these guys out early on for being pedophiles and psychopaths, they actually promote them, because once you've got a pedophile in office and you know they're a pedophile, then you control them fully.
Yeah. They're like a clone.
You're like exactly. That's exactly right. So like it's hard to run for president. It's hard to be president. It's easier to get the goods on the president, then you become president yourself, because you run that guy. So in the case of Ted Heath, so going back to this, in the early run up to the EU, the European Union, was a thing called the EEC, the European Economic Commission, and that was the building blocks of putting all these countries together. They did it from a financial standpoint first before they tried to integrate the countries together. So this was in like I want to say the 70s, I think.
Okay.
And Ted Heath was the prime minister, and Ted Heath was negotiating. So one of the things that in this EEC was the fishing rights that the United Kingdom had, or or Great Britain had to fish around their island. They're obviously an island, and so the fishing rights are a huge component of it. And at the time, they had 77% of the fishing rights in that region. And after
Which historically makes sense because of Great Britain's dominance of the seas.
For sure. After this EEC deal, they only had 22%. They had given the bulk of it away. And everyone is going, why would we do this? Why would we agree to this deal? What is Ted Heath doing for England? Like, he's screwing us up. Well, it turns out that Ted Heath was a notorious pedophile who would take boys out on his boat, rape them, murder them, and then throw them off the boat. And the Germans, well, at least, I mean, the rumors that the Germans knew it, somebody knew it. Might not have been the Germans for sure, but the rumors that the Germans knew it and manipulated him into a bad deal based on that. So a lot of times when people are now looking back at history and these political decisions that have been made, it helps now if you incorporate this additional question: was this person being manipulated? Was this person being blackmailed? Because if you find somebody who says, a politician who says, I'll never do this, I'll never do this, I'll never do this, and then they get into office and they do exactly that, sometimes it's because they're just liars, and sometimes it's because they intended to not do that, but they got the goods on them and they forced them to do it. And so if you look back on some of these decisions throughout history through that lens, they start to make a lot more sense as to why someone would agree to do something like this. And Jimmy Savile was running, I mean, amongst other things, he was running a sexual blackmail operation for sure. He had the goods on a lot of people.
And he was introduced to the royal family via Lord Mountbatten, who was into little boys. Very
much into little boys. Jimmy Savile was into everything. Everything and dead people, apparently.
Anything. That guy was a freak. And you know what's crazy is he looked like how you would expect him to look, just so ugly.
It's like the evilness in his soul just like manifest in his physical appearance. There's a good documentary that you can find. I've only seen it on YouTube, but I think if people search Jimmy Savile, something like, was Jimmy Savile a wizard? Then there's a documentary that I've watched. I've actually watched it twice, and it ties in all of the symbolism of the things that he was using, like his, he always had his cigar, and they talked about that being his wand, and the necklaces he wore, and the rings that he wore, and all of these things. They laid out a pretty good case that he was in fact a wizard. Now I know that sounds a little Lord of the Rings-ish, but these people that are in these high-ranking, like whether it's monarchies or government or high level of banking, there is an overriding theme that I know loses a lot of people when you mention this, but there is a Luciferian component to what they're into. And it has to do, like a lot of us will say, like, get out of here with that stuff, man. Nobody can, that stuff's hocus pocus. Nobody thinks that stuff really matters. Well, it matters to them. It's a big deal to them. And they seem to think, whether it actually has power or they perceive it to have power, they think that these rituals are part of what keeps them together. They also have, like the blood in, blood out oath that, the Crips and Bloods have, like, hey man, you want to be a part of this gang? You got to commit a robbery in front of us. Well, in their case, they have some even more sinister things that are required in order to join the club. And you,
for initiation.
Your initiation. You have guys like Ronald Bernard, who's the Dutch banker, talking about how he was involved in this in the high levels of banking, and it got to a point where the next part of what they wanted him to do was to murder a child, and he just couldn't do it, and he just broke down in tears. And he's relaying this story on video, and it's heartbreaking. But he's talking about that's where they are in this. They're in that level, because if you're in a position where you're murdering a child during a ritual event, then you have witnesses. They probably have video of it. You're in. There's no expiration date on that, man. You're in. If you're on film,
you can't really explain your way out of that.
No, there's no way. You can't explain your way out. There's no expiration date on the pedophilia component to it either. So back in the old days when they'd catch you cheating on your wife and blackmail you, or maybe you were a closeted homosexual in Washington D.C. working in Congress, and they'd say, if this gets out, it'll ruin your career. Okay. But nowadays, those things don't really carry much weight. But if you're a pedophile and they got the goods on you for that,
it always works.
It always works, man. They own you forever. And so part of what makes Jimmy Savile, people wonder, like, why is Jimmy Savile so connected to the royal family? Well, he's got the goods on them. They needed him as a procurer of children. He needed them for fame and wealth and protection. And so it becomes this mutually parasitic relationship these guys have, where they keep each other safe, and they make the decision that, like, as these investigations go up the ladder, you get to the police chief or the head of MI5 or whatever, and then all of a sudden it stops.
Yeah.
And you're like, what happened? We know what happened. That guy is either in on this stuff as well, he's part of the club, or the people that are in part of the club have expressed to him that this investigation stops, or else your kids wind up dead. and it's real easy to control people. It really is.